Supporters say it will save lives, promote healthy living, discourage car use and cut pollution. But has the transformation of the streets of London and other major cities for the benefit of cyclists gone too far? Well, the broadcaster and writer Janet Street Porter thinks so, and here's her take.
The wonderful city of London was once a pleasure to walk through, but it has been brought to its knees, all in the name of cycling. Until just a few weeks ago, our capital resembled a gridlocked building site. Roads were dug up and rebuilt to make way for a network of cycling superhighways. And it's not just London. In Bristol, segregated cycling lanes have appeared, and work on a similar scheme is near completion in Manchester. Plans for expansion in Edinburgh have been met by protests and petitions. While cyclists breeze through the city with little regard for anyone else, roads like this have been reduced to a crawl of traffic. It makes life vile for pedestrians who've had to tolerate an increase in car fumes.
Why should cyclists get preferential treatment over pedestrians? What about the very young, the elderly and the disabled? People who may not want to or be able to cycle, people who can't use public transport.
Riding a bike is subject to few rules, and many London cyclists can't even keep to those, whether it's stopping at a red light or keeping off the pavement. They aren't legally compelled to wear a helmet, and there's no MOT for bikes. Cyclists won't even have to use these highways when they're finished. They can still risk life on the open road.
I thought that we lived in a democracy, but it seems that in this city, cyclists have more clout than anyone else. Isn't it about time the rest of us stood up for our rights and told cyclists that roads are also for buses, cars, lorries and taxis?
But I suspect that cyclists won't be happy until all other forms of transport are eradicated.
And we're joined now by Janet and also by Andrew Gilligan, who was until yesterday Boris Johnson's cycling czar. Welcome to both of you. Janet Street Porter, I mean, cycling takes pressure, I suppose you could argue, off congested roads, and it means people can use other forms of transport. I mean, is that such a bad thing?
No, let me say from the outset that in my original column in the Independent and the I newspaper, I said I like cycling, I own a bike and I'm pro-cycling. What I said was that the cycling superhighways have caused inordinate traffic congestion, and I simply pointed out that riding a bike, especially in somewhere like London, seems to have very few rules and regulations about it. People can rent Boris bikes. I know they were brought in by Ken.
And you don't have to wear a helmet,
You
of course.
don't have to wear a helmet. You don't have to pass any driving tests. And people are routinely texting, doing selfies and so on. But more importantly, they're not compelled to use the cycling lanes.
Right, now that's the important point. You've spent all this money and time on these cycling lanes, and maybe they're a great idea, but not if no one's going to use them, or not very many people.
Sure, the cycling lane we built is 2 minutes walk from this building. Have you been out and seen it?
Yes, because I walk that way all the time, and lots of people use them, but not everybody does.
Hundreds and hundreds of people. And within hours of it opening, it was almost overcrowded. It
All
was so
through the day
heavily
or
used.
just in rush hour?
No, all through the day.
No,
You're seeing
well, when I
tourists in Boris
filmed, it
bikes.
was empty.
When
and
you
it
filmed,
was...
it had barriers in front of it. It hadn't
Yeah, well,
opened.
there were tourists using it without any crash helmets on, doing photographs of themselves in front of big vans.
The whole point of creating cycle lanes is to create a safe space where you don't need to wear crash helmets. Why should you need to wear a crash helmet?
Yeah, but why aren't they
cycle in the city?
compulsory, Andrew? If they're a safe space, which I completely agree, if you're in a segregated lane, it's safe. Why aren't they compulsory? Because you're still seeing cyclists veering all over the road and on the pavement.
You're really not.
And they're not.
Look, when you were filming, the lane wasn't open, as you could see from the barrier behind you when you did your stand-up. Now, the fact is, now they're open, virtually everybody is using them, and they are already showing that a lot of the objections are not founded.
Andrew, when we last spoke about this, which was on the London Politics show on Sunday, we showed you a a clip of that film. Admittedly, it was a time, space, and it was empty. And we saw cyclists using alternatives. It was empty for that period of time. And all I'm saying is, are you sure they are going to be used? If they don't have to use them, they won't necessarily.
I don't think we even need to argue about this. You need to just go outside this building, literally 2 minutes away from this building, and you will see them absolutely rammed with cyclists.
But I spent 10 years living in Clerkenwell in central London, and I can tell you that cyclists go all over the road and all over the pavement. Leaving aside the cycling superhighways, cyclists aren't compelled to stick to one part of the road.
This discussion is a kind of example of the lack of rationality about the debate in cycling. We're
but
discussing
the lack of rationality is that Boris said he wanted £12.50 allocated per Londoner going forward for cycling, but you're not allocating £12.50 for pedestrians.
We're arguing about whether or not something is happening that we can see is happening with our own eyes by walking 2 minutes from this building. These lanes are already a massive success, and they are hugely changing the market for cycling. They're getting it away from being a pursuit that you have to suit up for, wear a helmet, dress up in lycra, act very aggressively. You see kids out there, you see families, they're coming out for a ride in the sunshine on their bikes, and they are working. And the fact is, we have 10,000 people a month joining the population of London. The only way to cope with that on the roads is two things: either build more roads, which is politically impossible and physically impossible, or realign the roads to make better use of them by encouraging forms of transport like bikes, which take up less space.
Isn't that the reality, Janet Street? Well, that actually you've raised this point that more money is being spent on cyclists and the infrastructure around it, because actually it's the only viable option if you're looking ahead to the future, as Andrew said, because you're not going to be able to build more roads. We can only fit a certain number of cars, so we need to get more people on bikes.
Yeah, but we haven't got a fully rounded transport policy. What we've done is build cycling superhighways, but we've removed about a third of the road space right through the middle of London, but we haven't come up with a comprehensive strategy to make lorries only use roads at certain times of day. We haven't told drivers that they're going to be penalised, or they can only come in and out at certain times, and we haven't increased pedestrian areas. What I'm saying is, if you give a third of the road to cyclists, then you've got to work out how to use the other 2/3 so it's not gridlocked.
Right, well, let's talk
because
about
air
that.
quality in London has gone right down.
Let's talk about that. If we accept your point that cyclists are using the superhighway, what do you do about the rest?
Let me address Janet's points. There's 1,500 miles of main road in London. We have put cycle lanes in on 12 of those miles. And Janet wrote in an article the other week that had brought London to its knees. How can that possibly be true? And it's an example of the kind of hysterical rhetoric that we see about this.
It's not hysterical. I'm a Londoner, and I go through central London.
Sorry, what it's done is made journeys along the embankment slightly slower, a few minutes slower.
If you're in a car, gridlocked. That's how slow it is.
Only 7% of Londoners drive in London, central London, even once a week, and the vast majority of Londoners never drive. 71% never drive in central London.
From the point of view that unless people cycle, there's no future for them in London.
Is that how you see it? Let me ask Michael Douglas, because you were Shadow Transport Secretary at one point. Well, has the balance been tipped too far in favour of the cyclist, or is this the way to go?
There are days like this when I'm sort of glad I'm not the Shadow Transport Secretary, actually. I think
on your bike.
I think there is an element of hysteria on all sides of the debate, actually, and the truth is that's not how good transport policy should be made, because it doesn't also reflect the way that individuals transport themselves around the place. So most people are not cyclists, or they are motorists, or they are, train users. Most people actually are, to use the geeks' phrase, a multimodal. They use a number of different ways to get around the place, and you need a system. And that's why I think organisations, by the way, like Living Streets, that do an awful lot for pedestrians in terms of looking at how we manage our roads. But those roads are there for everyone. I think it's good news that we're expanding the amount of people who are cycling and their ability to do that. Equally, we've got to recognise, the importance of our London cabs and everything else, and we've got to recognise that London is very different to Barnsley or other parts of the country as well.
Whose side are you on? You cycle, don't you?
No, of course I don't. I'm on Janet's side. I think she's absolutely spot on. I think it's gone too far for the cyclist, but also the constant steps to make life more difficult for the motorist. So you've seen lots of roads being narrowed at junctions, making it harder to get the volumes through, very short times on traffic lights. I think there is hostility to the motorist, but that includes the cab driver. Cab drivers are finding it very difficult in their business, and part of that is their journeys have been slowed.
Right. So are you strangling one of the lifelines in London?
the assumption in all these conversations is that the car is a massively important part of central London. It isn't.
But it is if you're
Janet,
old and you
please,
can't
forgive
cycle.
me. Let me make
But
this
there
point.
are people who have to
let him
use
make a
cars.
final point.
Forgive me. I did speak about the tone and the level of language in this debate, and you're showing it. Now, the problem is that the vast majority of Londoners, literally, 71% of Londoners never drive at all in central London, and only 3% of Londoners drive in central London every day, and yet they actually get the vast majority of the road space. Now, what we're doing is just fractionally reallocating road space to the vast majority of Londoners who do not drive, including pedestrians. There is a lot of pedestrians in these.
It's the wrong statistic. It ought to be the
very
statistic
briefly.
of percentage of journeys being done by car rather than percentage of people
of journeys
doing
being
it.
done by car is
But-
absolutely...
but
every morning, let me give you the numbers
hold
on that,
on,
Jake.
I said that was the final point.
There are
You're
one-
coming in again.
There are
You've got to
1.3
You've got
million...
to include taxis and
Sure,
minicabs
1.3 million people come
vans
into central
and
London
all
every
these
day,
other
right?
people
All right.
Of those,
who need to
65,000
I'm going to
come by
finish it
car.
there, and you can all go home on your various modes of transport. I presume, Janet,
I'll
you're
show
not
you-
on a
I'll show
bike,
you
and
the
you
cycle lane,
could give
Janet.
her a
You've got
lift.
your trainers on.
Thank you both very much.